All right, so I thought we'd start off with Matthew 26:26. I think this is a passage that everybody's going to recognize. It goes something like this. Now, as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it, broke it, and gave it to the disciples. I'm going to pass out some bread now.
Thank you for narrating what we're doing.
Right? I feel like I had to say what was being done. All right, now that you have your bread. And he said, take, eat, this is my body. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink of it, all of you. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. So I think now we should take a moment and take of the body of Christ and the blood.
So we've been kind of dissecting these thoughts the whole time. You know, we've been kind of dissecting the different words in it, how it's got its names from the Eucharist, which was one we spoke about. We've spoke about the love feast, which was one of the earlier terms. We've kind of broke down where it's kind of barreling through into history and really from the Passover on. And this is what is commonly now referred to as the Last Supper, the Lord's Supper. I mean, Steph is talking about that. And now we're kind of looking at it and saying, okay, so from this moment, from that Last Supper, Lord's Supper moment, when he does this Passover feast that they've been participating in, you know, this is a ritual, a rhythm that they've been doing. Right. And Jesus takes it and says, here's the fullness of it. I am that lamb. I am going to do this, that whole idea.
Right.
Now, how does communion find its place, you know, in the Christian life, at the early church, from this moment? Because, I mean, there's a lot packed into what Jesus says there.
Yeah, sure.
From the historical perspective.
Yeah.
But also, something to me that's always stood out is that last phrase that he talks about.
Oh, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom.
Yeah, he seems to be really pointing to hey, here's going to be a signal post, if you will, that this has happened when I'm eating and drinking with you again, right? You know, I mean, and I think that's the whole banquet idea is something that Jesus uses just constantly. This wedding feast banquet idea, and he's definitely recalling that to me. You know, he's like, hey, eat it, this feast, this whole thing. I'm going to do it again with you. I mean, it's going to be that wedding feast that I've been teaching about, you know, in Sermon on the Mount, all this kind of stuff. That's what's going to happen, you know, in spiritual sense and in a physical sense. And he says, so basically it's like a signpost, watch for this, because when I do it again, you know, that's how you're going to know this new thing that I'm talking about, this forgiveness is here, you know.
I like that.
And then we've discussed it too. I mean, this went on for a straight 1,500 years within the church, where it was a regular thing that they did, that they took of. And we talked about this earlier. Even up to the first schism separation, they continue to see this as the center point. Communion was huge.
Yeah.
But then we get to today, and I mean, yeah, it's something that we do. Some churches do it on special occasions, right? So
some people have it once a month. Some people just when it's a special occasion.
Right.
I don't know very many that do it on a real rhythm, like a weekly rhythm.
Right.
That it still takes place more as a meal even. I know many, again, we refer to that dink it and sink it Jesus.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
There's many that do that, and there's nothing wrong with the action of doing that if the heart motive's right. I don't think they're doing it personally. Right. I mean, I don't find a problem with that.
Yeah.
But I do think that without it being this full actualization kind of a thing, it kind of shortens it and cheapens it. It's kind of like going and it's like, hey, I saw a reel of this, and it was like a husband's like, I'm going to take my wife to a members only restaurant and all this stuff. And he takes her to Costco.
Yep.
Right? And she's not having it. She's there. You can see it, right? And I think that's to an extent, I'm not bashing that tradition because I've done it. We do it even in my home church.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how we do it, smaller portions for logistical reasons. So I'm not saying anything wrong with that as long as there's more heart and meaning behind it. But it's kind of like being like, hey, I'm going to take you and we're just going to do fast food tonight. Versus
it's
like,
less
no, we're
personal. It's less personal that sacredism that's supposed to be there is kind of like, oh, let's just kind of go through it because we know the thing. Let's do the thing, basically.
Yeah.
Well, and we also miss, I think, a piece of it, right? Like, because we recognize this going up and taking communion, taking of the bread, taking of the wine. But what about the community piece? What about talking of the things of God, right? Like, yes, so when we do it, generally we're in church, right? So, of course, we're listening to a sermon and everything, but I feel like there's still more to it than that, because there should be fellowship outside of just receiving the message from the pastor.
Well, and like First John talks about, like there's healing in that. When everyone is in koinonia, this fellowship, this intimate healing happens there. Something, the presence of Christ is really present in us,
Right.
and through us. It's not. I mean, I know there's some traditions that look at it in the bread and the wine. I mean, you talked about that transubstantiation thing. It's like, well, it's not this really that changes the substance. It's by doing this thing, it changes the substance of me. And I become something different than I was before, which is the healing. It shifts mindsets. It shifts by, it's not the actual drinking of the wine necessarily or eating of the bread. It's I'm going to do this in remembrance, bringing it fully back to action, and then with people, and they're going to speak into my life. I'm going to speak into them from good days to bad days.
Right.
It's going to feed off of each other. And there's a real thing that happens there, I think.
Well, there's a complete reality in it. May I pull back the curtain some? Would that be okay? Yeah, we're all friends here.
Yeah.